December 3rd, 2024, Philadelphia. Sylvester Stallone hadn't cried in public since 1976, but there he was, kneeling on cold linoleum, holding his dying German shepherd while cameras rolled. The veterinarian had promised to end Bruno's suffering quickly. Sly whispered apologies into his dog's ear, apologies that had nothing to do with cancer.
Bruno had kept his secret for 15 years. Then Dr. Elena Morales pulled off her surgical gloves and spoke 4 words that changed everything. "Hello, grandfather. It's Maria." The emergency clinic went silent. Sly's hands froze on Bruno's fur, because the granddaughter he'd never met was holding the syringe, and she knew exactly what Bruno had witnessed that night in 1998. The night Sly's wife didn't slip down those stairs by accident. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The syringe trembled in Dr. Elena Morales' hand, its contents catching the harsh fluorescent light. Sly's world tilted on its axis, not from grief over Bruno's labored breathing, but from the impossible reality standing before him in surgical scrubs. "You're lying." His voice came out as a rasp, the same gravelly tone that had launched 1,000 movie trailers, now reduced to a whisper of denial. Elena's dark eyes, Maria's eyes, he realized with a sick lurch, never wavered from his face. Maria Christina Stallone, born January 15, 1977, estranged from her father after discovering her mother's death, wasn't the accident everyone believed. "My mother never married, but she kept your daughter's name. I'm Elena Morales Stallone." The small emergency clinic felt like it was shrinking around them. Through the observation window, Sly caught glimpses of curious faces, veterinary assistants, other pet owners, all drawn by whispers of, "Is that really Sylvester Stallone?" None of them understood they were witnessing the collision of 15 years of buried secrets. Bruno wheezed beneath Sly's trembling hands, his once powerful body now fragile as old paper. The dog's golden eyes, clouded with pain and age, looked up at his master with the same unwavering loyalty he'd shown since that terrible night in 1998. The night everything changed. "Where is she?" Sly managed, though part of him already knew. The grief in Elena's expression told him everything. "Mom died 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer." Elena's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the raw pain underneath. "She spent her last weeks in hospice, asking me to promise I'd find you. Not to forgive you, grandfather, to get answers." The word grandfather hit him like a physical blow. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, meeting his daughter's child, being part of a family again, but never like this, never with Bruno dying between them and the weight of Jennifer's death hanging in the air like poison gas. "The dog," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength as she found her footing in this confrontation she'd clearly rehearsed. "Bruno wasn't just your companion, was he? Mom told me everything before she died, about that night, about what really happened on those stairs." Sly's grip tightened on Bruno's fur. The German shepherd had been barely 2 years old when Jennifer fell, full of energy and loyalty, following Sly everywhere in their Chestnut Hill mansion, including into Jennifer's study that night, including to the top of those marble stairs. "She was drunk," Sly said automatically, the lie he'd told police, reporters, and himself for over 2 decades. "Jennifer had been drinking. She slipped. With bruises on her wrists, with you listed as the primary beneficiary on a life insurance policy she tried to change 3 days earlier." Elena's voice cut through the clinic's antiseptic air like a scalpel. "The coroner ruled it accidental because you were Sylvester Stallone, because heroes don't murder their wives." The accusation hung between them, while Bruno's breathing grew more labored. Other customers were definitely watching now, some with phones raised, recording this surreal confrontation. In a few hours, this would be splashed across every tabloid and social media platform in the world. "I loved Jennifer," Sly whispered, and for the first time in years, he meant it completely. "But you killed her anyway." Elena lifted the syringe, and for one terrifying moment, Sly wasn't sure if she intended it for Bruno or for him. Mom spent 15 years researching that night. Police reports, insurance documents, witness statements. She became obsessed with proving what Bruno saw. The clinic's front door chimed as another emergency case entered, but the receptionist quickly redirected them to another room. Dr. Morales had made it clear this room was off limits. "What do you want?" Sly asked, his voice breaking on the last word. Elena knelt beside them, bringing her face level with his. Up close, the resemblance to Maria was devastating. The same determined jaw, the same fierce intelligence that had made his daughter so formidable, so dangerous to his secrets. "I want the truth," she said simply, "and I want you to understand what your lies cost us. What they cost my mother, what they cost me, what they'll cost you." Bruno's breathing hitched, a wet sound that spoke of minutes, not hours. Sly looked down at his oldest friend, his only companion, the silent witness to his greatest shame. "He's suffering," Elena said, her veterinarian training overriding her personal vendetta for a moment. "Whatever happened that night, whatever he saw, he deserves peace." Sly nodded, tears finally coming. Not for Jennifer, not for Maria, not even for himself. For Bruno, who had kept his secret faithfully and was now dying in the crossfire of a war he'd never chosen. "Do it," Sly whispered. Elena positioned the needle, her hand steady despite everything. "This isn't over, grandfather. This is just the beginning." As the syringe emptied into Bruno's bloodstream, Sly felt his last connection to that night in 1998 slip away. His faithful witness was gone, but his granddaughter had inherited her mother's relentless pursuit of justice, and she was just getting started. The silence that followed Bruno's final breath stretched like a chasm between grandfather and granddaughter. Sly's weathered hands remained on the dog's still chest, feeling the absence of heartbeat like phantom pain in an amputated limb. 24 years of companionship ended with a whisper of exhaled air and the clinical efficiency of veterinary compassion. Elena withdrew the needle with practiced precision, her movements betraying nothing of the emotional earthquake that had just reshaped both their worlds. But Sly caught the slight tremor in her fingers as she capped the syringe. She wasn't as controlled as she wanted him to believe. "He's gone," she said quietly, the pronouncement hanging in the antiseptic air like incense at a funeral mass. Sly nodded, unable to speak. Bruno's golden fur was already losing its warmth beneath his palms, and with it went the last tangible connection to the man he'd been before that November night in 1998. Before Jennifer's scream echoed through their Chestnut Hill mansion. Before Maria's horrified face appeared at the top of the stairs, taking in the scene below with those same intelligent dark eyes that now belonged to the woman kneeling beside him. "Tell me about the house," Elena said, her voice softer now but no less determined. "The one where it happened." Sly's throat constricted. "Why?" "Because I've been watching it for 3 years. Ever since Mom died." She pulled off her latex gloves with mechanical precision, never breaking eye contact. 1247 Stenton Avenue. Italian marble foyer. Spiral staircase with wrought iron railings. You had it renovated twice since then, but you never moved the stairs. The casual recitation of details hit him like physical blows. His sanctuary, his prison, dissected with the clinical detachment she'd just shown Bruno. "You've been watching my house?" "Among other things." Elena stood, suddenly seeming taller, more formidable in her scrubs than any opponent he'd faced on screen. "Did you know there are exactly 43 steps from your front gate to your front door? That you have groceries delivered every Tuesday at 2 p.m., that you haven't left the property in over 6 months except for medical appointments and today?" The surveillance revelation should have terrified him, but instead Sly felt a strange sense of relief. The waiting was over. 24 years of looking over his shoulder, expecting Maria to return with evidence or accusations or police, and instead she'd sent her daughter, a daughter raised on stories of betrayal and loss, trained in the precision of medical intervention, and apparently gifted with her mother's relentless patience. "Maria taught you well," he said, the words coming out more admiration than accusation. "She taught me everything except forgiveness." Elena moved to the sink, washing her hands with the same methodical care she'd shown with the euthanasia. "She died believing you murdered her mother and destroyed our family to cover it up. Her last words were your name. The image of Maria on her deathbed, still consumed by the mystery that had driven her away at 19, carved another piece from Sly's already hollow chest. His daughter had died alone, angry, convinced of his guilt, and he hadn't even known she was sick. "I didn't know about the cancer," he whispered. Would it have mattered? Elena turned from the sink, her dark hair catching the fluorescent light the same way Maria's had when she was young and fierce and convinced she could save the world through journalism. Would you have told her the truth if you'd known she was dying? The question hung between them like a challenge. Outside the examination room, the clinic continued its normal rhythm. Dogs barking, phones ringing, the ordinary chaos of animals in crisis. But in this sterile space, time seemed suspended, waiting for his answer. Sly looked down at Bruno's peaceful face, remembering the puppy who'd bounded into their lives just months before Jennifer's death. The dog had been Jennifer's idea, a companion for the empty nest years she'd never lived to see. Bruno had witnessed their fights, Jennifer's drinking, the escalating tension that preceded that final, fatal confrontation, and now the only living witness was gone, taking his secrets to whatever dreams dogs found beyond life. "The truth," Sly said slowly, "isn't what you think it is." Elena's laugh was sharp, bitter. 24 years, and that's your opening gambit? Deflection? It's not deflection, it's... He struggled for words, feeling the weight of decades pressing against his ribs. "It's complicated." Murder usually is. She pulled out her phone, and for a moment Sly thought she might call the police. Instead, she scrolled through photos until she found what she wanted. "This is what your complicated truth cost us." The image showed Maria in a hospital bed, gaunt and bald from chemotherapy, but still beautiful, still unmistakably his daughter. Her eyes held the same fierce intelligence, but now tempered with pain and an exhaustion that went deeper than physical illness. "She never stopped investigating," Elena continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Never stopped believing she'd find proof. It consumed her entire adult life." Sly closed his eyes, but the image remained burned behind his eyelids. His little girl, grown old in pursuit of a truth that might destroy them both. The weight of Maria's dying face on that phone screen pressed against Sly's chest like a physical thing, making each breath a conscious effort. His daughter, brilliant, stubborn, beautiful Maria, reduced to a shadow of herself in pursuit of answers he'd spent decades burying. The irony wasn't lost on him. She'd inherited his relentless determination, the same quality that had built his career and destroyed his family. "She looks like her mother," he said finally, his voice barely audible above the clinic's humming fluorescent lights. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. She had Jennifer's eyes, but your obsession. Mom couldn't let it go, even when it was killing her. Especially then. "What do you mean?" "The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant searching. Her oncologist said it might have accelerated the cancer's spread. She was literally dying to prove you were a murderer." Elena's words cut like surgical instruments, precise and devastating. But 3 weeks before she passed, something changed. Sly's head snapped up. "Changed how?" Elena slipped the phone back into her scrubs pocket, her movements deliberate, controlled. For the first time since revealing her identity, uncertainty flickered across her features. She received something in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Philadelphia. After that, she stopped talking about you entirely. Stopped showing me police reports and insurance documents. Just stopped. The examination room seemed to contract around them. Sly's hands, still resting on Bruno's cooling body, began to shake. "What did she receive?" "She wouldn't tell me. Said it was better if I didn't know, that some truths were more dangerous than lies." Elena's composure cracked slightly, revealing the frightened granddaughter beneath the vengeful veterinarian. "But she made me promise to find you after she was gone. Not to confront you, to warn you. Warn me about..." Elena reached into her lab coat and withdrew a manila envelope, its edges worn from handling. "She gave me this the night before she died. Said if anything ever happened to her, anything that wasn't the cancer, I should bring it to you." Sly stared at the envelope as if it were a loaded weapon. His name was written across the front in Maria's careful handwriting, but beneath it, in different ink, were 4 words that made his blood freeze. "For when they come." "They," he whispered. Mom never explained. But she was terrified those last few weeks. Not of dying. She'd made peace with the cancer. She was scared of something else, someone else. She started checking the locks obsessively, looking over her shoulder. She even asked me to change her hospice room twice. The envelope felt heavier than it should have when Elena placed it in his trembling hands. Through the manila paper, he could feel the outline of photographs, documents, something that crinkled like old newspaper clippings. Why didn't you give this to me earlier? Elena's laugh held no humor. Because I needed to see who you really were first, whether you were the monster Mom had painted or something else entirely. She paused, studying his face with the same analytical intensity she'd used to examine Bruno. The way you held him while he died, that wasn't an act. Whatever else you've done, you loved that dog. Sly's throat constricted. Bruno had been his confessor, his constant companion through 2 decades of self-imposed exile. The dog had never judged him for that night, never looked at him with accusation or fear. Only unconditional loyalty, right until the end. Open it, Elena said quietly. With fingers that felt clumsy and foreign, Sly tore open the envelope's seal. The first item was a photograph. Bruno as a puppy, sitting in Jennifer's lap in their old living room. But it was what Jennifer was holding that made his hands shake violently, a leather journal, its pages filled with her distinctive handwriting. Where did Maria get this? His voice came out as a croak. Keep looking. The next photograph showed the journal open to a specific page, the writing clearly visible. Jennifer's neat script detailed her suspicions about their marriage, her growing fear, and most damning of all, her discovery of something she called the arrangement. But it was the final item that shattered what remained of Sly's carefully constructed world. A business card, expensive stock, embossed lettering. Vincent Torino, private investigator. On the back, in Jennifer's handwriting, he knows about Philly. Payment due soon. The card slipped from Sly's nerveless fingers, floating to the clinic floor like a falling leaf. 24 years collapsed into a single moment of recognition. Torino, the name he'd spent 2 decades trying to forget, the shadow from his past that had driven him from Philadelphia's Little Italy into the spotlight of Hollywood, only to follow him home like a curse. Mom received 5 more of these cards after her diagnosis, Elena said, watching his face with clinical attention. Someone's been keeping Jennifer's investigator on retainer all these years. Someone who wants the truth about that night as much as Mom did. Sly stared down at Bruno's peaceful face, understanding finally flooding through him. His faithful companion hadn't just been a witness to Jennifer's death, he'd been protection, a constant presence that had kept Sly's enemies at bay through simple loyalty and intimidation. Now Bruno was gone, and after 24 years, Vincent Torino was ready to collect. The business card lay on the clinic floor like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. Sly couldn't bring himself to pick it up, couldn't stop staring at those embossed letters that spelled out a name from his darkest nightmares. Vincent Torino. The ghost who'd been haunting him for nearly 25 years, apparently very much alive and patient as death itself. I need to go, he said suddenly, pushing himself up from Bruno's still form. His knees protested the movement, age and shock making him unsteady. I need to get home. Elena stepped between him and the door. Running won't help. Not anymore. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Her voice carried Maria's stubborn determination, that same refusal to back down that had made his daughter such a formidable journalist. Who is Vincent Torino? What did he want with Jennifer? With Mom? Sly's hands shook as he bent to retrieve the business card, his fingers reluctant to touch the damning evidence. The stock was expensive, professional, the kind of calling card that suggested Torino had done well for himself over the years. The thought made Sly's stomach turn. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. He was supposed to be dead. Elena's eyebrows lifted. Supposed to be? Philadelphia, 1997. There was a situation, a misunderstanding about some money I owed. Sly tucked the card into his jacket pocket with reverent fear, as if it might explode. Torino was the kind of man who collected debts in blood. When I left for Hollywood, I thought I'd left him behind, but he found you anyway. Jennifer hired him. The admission came out broken hollow. My own wife brought my past to our doorstep, and I didn't even know until it was too late. Outside the examination room, someone was arguing with the receptionist about wait times, their voice growing increasingly agitated. The mundane complaint seemed to come from another world, a reality where the worst problem was a delayed appointment rather than a decades-old death sentence finally coming due. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through what looked like dozens of photos. Mom documented everything, every piece of evidence, every connection she made. She stopped on an image that made Sly's vision blur, Jennifer's journal, open to a page dated 3 days before her death. "He came to the house again today," Elena read aloud. "Vincent wants his money, but S keeps stalling. He doesn't know I've been recording their conversations. He doesn't know about the copies I've made of his financial records. If something happens to me..." Stop. Sly's voice came out strangled. "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. The arrangements made in Philadelphia, the debt that never got paid, it's going to destroy us all." The examination room walls seemed to close in around them. Sly gripped the metal table where Bruno lay, needing something solid to anchor him as the past crashed over him in waves. Jennifer had known. She'd known about Torino, about the arrangement, about the impossible choice that had driven him to Hollywood's bright lights and false promises. "She was going to expose you," Elena said, her voice softer now but no less devastating. "Not just for whatever happened that night on the stairs, for everything that came before it. You think I killed her to keep her quiet. It wasn't a question, didn't you?" The answer should have been simple. A denial, an explanation, the truth he'd carried alone for 24 years. Instead, Sly found himself looking at his granddaughter's face, seeing Maria's fierce intelligence tempered with Jennifer's unwavering moral compass. Two women who'd loved him despite his flaws, who deserved better than the man he'd become. "The night Jennifer died," he said slowly, "she wasn't the only one in danger." Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. Unknown number. Philadelphia area code. They stared at each other across Bruno's body, the ringing filling the small space like an alarm. Sly's instincts screamed at him to grab the phone, to answer it, to finally confront the voice he'd been dreading for decades. Instead, he backed toward the door. "Don't answer that." "Why not?" "Because once Torino knows you exist, knows you're Jennifer's granddaughter," Sly's voice broke, "he'll use you the same way he used her, the same way he's been using me." The phone stopped ringing. Elena's hands were trembling now, her clinical composure finally cracking under the weight of inherited terror. "What did you do in Philadelphia? What arrangement?" Before Sly could answer, the phone buzzed with a text message. Elena's face went white as she read it. "What does it say?" She turned the screen toward him, and Sly felt the last of his carefully constructed world collapse. 5 words in block letters. "Bruno is dead. You're next." Someone had been watching them. Someone knew exactly where they were, exactly what had just happened in this sterile room where secrets died with dogs and granddaughters inherited their mother's dangerous curiosity. Torino wasn't just alive. He was here. The text message hung between them like a death sentence. Sly's vision tunneled, the sterile examination room fading until only those 5 words existed. "Bruno is dead. You're next. We have to leave. Now." His voice came out hoarse, decades of buried terror finally surfacing. "Elena, we have to." She was already moving, her medical training overriding panic. Back exit, through the surgical suite. She grabbed a set of keys from her lab coat, but her hands shook so violently they clattered to the floor. Sly knelt beside her, their fingers touching as they both reached for the keys. For a moment, he saw Maria in her face, not the angry 19-year-old who'd stormed out of his life, but the little girl who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms, trusting him to keep the monsters away. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so goddamn sorry you're part of this." Elena's grip tightened on the keys. "Save the apologies. Just tell me how to keep us alive." They rose together, but before they could move toward the door, the clinic's lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the building went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in hellish red shadows. Through the thin walls they could hear confused voices, someone calling out that the whole block had lost power. But Sly knew better. This wasn't an outage, it was a calling card. The back exit, Elena urged, but Sly caught her arm. No, he'll have people there too. His mind raced through possibilities, discarding each one as futile. Torino had had 24 years to plan this moment, 24 years to map every exit and contingency. He's not just here to collect a debt anymore. What do you mean? Sly pulled Jennifer's journal page from the envelope, his eyes finding the damning words even in the dim red light. The arrangement wasn't just about money, it was about silence. Torino has been my insurance policy and my prison for 2 decades. Elena's breath came in short bursts. Insurance against what? Against the truth about why I really left Philadelphia. He folded the page carefully, as if handling something sacred. Jennifer thought she was investigating my past, but she stumbled onto something else entirely. Something that could have destroyed more than just our marriage. The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere in the darkened clinic. Slow, deliberate steps that seemed to know exactly where they were headed. Elena pressed closer to him, and he could smell her fear, sharp and metallic, like blood. In 1997, I wasn't just another small-time actor trying to make it big, Sly continued, his voice barely audible. I was a witness, a federal witness. Elena's eyes widened in the red emergency light. Witness to what? 3 bodies in a South Philly warehouse. A deal gone wrong between Torino's crew and some Russians from Brighton Beach. The memories came flooding back with brutal clarity. The smell of cordite, the wet sound of bullets finding flesh, his own voice screaming into a phone as he begged the FBI for protection. I was supposed to testify, put away half the Torino family organization. The footsteps stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound had been. Elena's hand found his arm, her fingers gripping tight enough to bruise. But you didn't testify, she said, understanding creeping into her voice. I ran instead, changed my name, got into acting, built a whole new life in Hollywood. The feds were furious, but there wasn't much they could do. Sly closed his eyes, seeing Jennifer's face the night she'd confronted him with Torino's card. I thought I was protecting everyone. Jennifer, Maria, myself. I thought if I just stayed quiet, stayed hidden, but Jennifer found out. She hired Torino to investigate me for a divorce, not knowing who he really was. Can you imagine? My own wife, paying the man who wanted me dead to dig up dirt on our marriage. The irony still burned in his chest like acid. When she realized what she'd done, she tried to call it off. But Torino saw an opportunity. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. He used her to control you. For 24 years. Monthly payments funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. Hush money disguised as legitimate business expenses. Sly's laugh held no humor. My entire Hollywood career has been an elaborate money laundering operation for the Philadelphia mob. The examination room door handle turned slowly, metal grinding against metal in the silence. Elena pressed against the far wall, her professional composure completely shattered. This wasn't medicine anymore. This was survival. And now? She asked. Sly looked down at Bruno's peaceful form one last time, understanding finally why the dog had never left his side. Bruno hadn't just been a companion. He'd been a guardian, a living reminder of what loyalty could cost. Now Torino doesn't need me quiet anymore, he said, moving to shield Elena as the door began to open. He needs me dead. Because somewhere in Jennifer's investigation, she found proof of everything. And if that evidence ever surfaces... The door swung wide, revealing a figure silhouetted against the red emergency lighting. Vincent Torino stepped into the examination room like a specter from Sly's darkest nightmares, older but unmistakably dangerous. "Hello, Sylvester," he said, his voice carrying the same South Philly accent that had haunted Sly's dreams. "We need to talk." Vincent Torino looked nothing like the street thug Sly remembered from 1997. The man who stepped into the blood-red emergency lighting wore an expensive suit, silver hair perfectly styled, hands manicured like a banker's. Only his eyes remained unchanged, flat black marbles that had watched 3 men die in a South Philly warehouse without blinking. 24 years, Torino said, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "You've aged well, Sylvester. Hollywood's been good to you." Elena pressed herself against the far wall, but Torino's attention remained fixed on Sly. There was something almost paternal in his smile, the look of a teacher greeting a wayward student who'd finally returned to class. "Vincent," Sly's voice came out steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. "I've been making the payments. Every month, like we agreed." "Oh, I know." Punctual as a Swiss watch, Torino moved closer to the examination table where Bruno lay, his gaze dropping to the still form. "Beautiful animal. German shepherds are known for their loyalty, aren't they? Their memory." The words carried weight that made Sly's skin crawl. "What do you want?" Torino's laugh was cultured now, refined, nothing like the guttural chuckle that had echoed through that warehouse. "Sylvester, I've gotten everything I wanted from you. A successful money laundering operation, a Hollywood insider feeding me information, a federal witness who disappeared so completely that the FBI gave up looking." Elena made a small sound, fear or recognition, Sly couldn't tell. Torino's eyes flicked to her for the first time, and his smile widened. "And you must be the lovely Dr. Morales, Maria's daughter." He spoke her mother's name like a prayer. "You have her eyes, that same righteous fire that made her such an excellent investigator." "How do you—" Elena began, but Torino held up a manicured hand. "I've been watching your family for years, my dear, watching and waiting." He turned back to Sly. "You see, Sylvester, your daughter inherited her mother's curiosity. Even after all these years, she kept digging, kept asking questions about that night on the stairs. The examination room felt smaller with each word, the walls pressing in like a tomb." Sly gripped the metal table's edge until his knuckles went white. "Maria's been dead for 3 years. Has she?" Torino's smile never wavered. "Are you certain?" The words hit Sly like a physical blow. The room tilted, his vision blurring as 24 years of carefully constructed reality began to crumble. "That's impossible. I went to her funeral. I saw the—" "You saw what I wanted you to see." Torino reached into his jacket, and Sly tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, he withdrew a manila envelope identical to the one Elena had given him. "Maria's been living under federal protection since 2018. New name, new identity, new life." The cancer story was creative fiction. Elena's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. "My mother's alive?" "Very much so, though she goes by Sarah Mitchell now. Lovely little house in Portland, if memory serves." Torino set the envelope on the table beside Bruno's body, the gesture almost reverent. "She's been working with the FBI, you see, building a case against me using evidence she inherited from Jennifer." The revelation crashed over Sly in waves. Maria alive, Maria working against him, Maria letting Elena believe she was dead while orchestrating this elaborate deception. "But here's what your mother didn't know," Torino continued, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I've been feeding information to the FBI through her investigation. Every document she thought she discovered, every connection she made, I wanted her to find it all." Elena stepped forward, her medical composure finally cracking. "Why?" "Because, my dear, your grandfather isn't the witness I've been afraid of all these years." Torino's smile turned predatory. "He's been my greatest asset, a Hollywood insider with access to celebrities, politicians, entertainment executives. Do you have any idea how much blackmail material flows through Sylvester's social circles?" The truth hit Sly like a sledgehammer. 24 years of believing he was being extorted, of living in fear, of paying blood money to stay alive. All of it a lie. He hadn't been Torino's victim, he'd been his unwitting accomplice. "You son of a bitch," Sly whispered. "I prefer business partner," Torino corrected. "Though after this conversation, I'm afraid our arrangement will need to be restructured." Elena's voice cut through their exchange, sharp and desperate. "What do you want from us?" Torino's laugh filled the small room like poison gas. "Want? Child, I don't want anything from you. You've already given me everything I need." He gestured toward Bruno's still form. "Your loyal companion. There wasn't just a witness to Jennifer's death. He was a recording device." The words made no sense until Sly saw Elena's face go white with understanding. "The microchip," she whispered. "The one I scanned when you brought him in. It wasn't just identification. Torino's smile was triumphant. 24 years of audio recordings. Every conversation, every confession, every moment of guilt you whispered to that faithful dog, all of it stored, all of it waiting. Sly felt his legs give out, the weight of betrayal crushing him to his knees beside Bruno's body. His most trusted companion, his confessor, his only friend, turned into a weapon against him by the very man he'd been running from. The beautiful irony, Torino said, is that you did it to yourself. The weight of Torino's revelation pressed down on Sly like a collapsed building. He knelt beside Bruno's body, his hands trembling as they hovered over the still form that had been his only comfort for 8 years. Every whispered confession, every moment of grief, every private admission of guilt, all of it recorded, stored, weaponized. "Get up," Torino commanded, but his voice had lost its cultured refinement. The South Philly street thug was bleeding through the expensive veneer. "We're not finished." Elena moved toward her grandfather, her medical instincts overriding terror. "Leave him alone. You got what you came for." "Did I?" Torino's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. 24 years of recordings, yes, but not the one conversation I really need. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like audio files. "Your grandfather has been remarkably careful about certain topics. Never once mentioned the warehouse, never spoke about the 3 bodies, never confessed to the one thing that could put me away forever." Sly's head snapped up, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "You need me to say it. You need a confession. The FBI's case against me hinges on your testimony from 1997. Testimony you never gave." Torino pocketed the phone, his movements precise and deliberate. "But if they had a recording of you admitting you lied to them, admitting you were paid to disappear, well, that changes everything." "I won't do it." Sly struggled to his feet, Elena's steadying hand on his arm. "I won't give you what you need to destroy those recordings." Torino's smile returned, cold and patient. "Oh, but you will. Because if you don't, Maria dies for real this time, and your granddaughter here joins her." The threat hung in the air like poison. Elena's grip on Sly's arm tightened, her breathing shallow and quick. Through the red emergency lighting, he could see the same fierce determination that had driven Jennifer to investigate him, that had compelled Maria to work with the FBI despite the danger. "You're bluffing," Elena said, but her voice shook. "If you kill us, you lose your leverage." "Do I?" Torino reached into his other jacket pocket, withdrawing a small recording device. "I don't need you alive, child. I just need your grandfather's voice on tape, confessing to federal agents that he committed perjury, that he took money to disappear, that his testimony would have been lies anyway." Sly stared at the device, seeing his future, and Elena's, reduced to a few minutes of coerced words. But something in Torino's expression bothered him, a flicker of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "The warehouse recordings," Sly said slowly. "You don't have them, do you?" Torino's composure cracked for just an instant. "What are you talking about?" "The FBI case. If it hinged on my testimony from 1997, they would have closed it years ago. But they didn't, did they?" Sly took a step forward, pieces of a decades-old puzzle finally clicking into place. "They have other evidence. Physical evidence. And you're running out of time." Elena's eyes widened as she followed his reasoning. "The statute of limitations." "Not for murder," Sly continued, his voice gaining strength. "Those 3 bodies in the warehouse. One of them was an undercover federal agent, wasn't he, Vincent? That's why you've been so desperate to discredit my testimony. It's not about the money laundering or the racketeering charges." Torino's hand moved toward his jacket, but Elena was faster. She lunged for the recording device, knocking it from his grasp. It clattered across the floor, coming to rest beneath the examination table. "You sanctimonious bastard," Torino snarled, all pretense of civility gone. "You think you figured it out? You think you understand what's at stake here?" "I understand enough." Sly positioned himself between Elena and Torino, decades of guilt transforming into something harder, more dangerous. "I understand that you've been terrified of me for 24 years, not the other way around. I understand that Maria's investigation wasn't about proving I killed Jennifer. It was about proving you did. The accusation exploded in the small room like a grenade. Torino's face contorted with rage, his careful mask finally slipping completely away. Jennifer was a liability. She was going to expose everything, destroy years of careful planning. I did what was necessary. You pushed her down those stairs. I prevented a catastrophe. Torino's voice rose to a shout. Your wife was going to hand the FBI everything. My operations, my contacts, my entire organization, all because she couldn't accept that her precious husband was a coward who ran instead of testifying. Elena's sharp intake of breath cut through Torino's tirade. In his rage, he'd given them exactly what they needed, a confession. And somewhere in the darkness of the clinic, Sly could hear the faint sound of approaching sirens. The recording device lay forgotten on the floor, but it no longer mattered. Vincent Torino had just confessed to Jennifer's murder, and they both knew it. For the first time in 24 years, Sly Stallone smiled. The smile that spread across Sly's face was nothing like the manufactured charm he'd perfected for cameras. This was something raw and primal, the expression of a man who had carried a 24-year burden and finally felt it lifting from his shoulders. Torino's eyes darted toward the recording device under the table, then to the clinic's entrance where the sirens grew louder. His composure, so carefully maintained for decades, crumbled like wet paper. You set me up, he whispered, the realization hitting him with visible force. No, Elena said, her voice steady now despite the chaos. You set yourself up the moment you let pride override survival. But Torino wasn't finished. The cornered animal in him emerged fully as he lunged for the fallen device, his expensive suit tearing as he scrambled across the floor. Sly moved to intercept him, 24 years of suppressed rage finally finding its target. They collided beside Bruno's still form, two old men grappling over a piece of plastic and circuits that held the power to rewrite history. Torino's manicured fingers closed around the device just as Sly's hands found his throat. Jennifer, Sly growled, pressing down. Say her name. Torino's eyes bulged, but his grip on the recorder never loosened. With his free hand he clawed at Sly's face, drawing blood. The metallic taste filled Sly's mouth, mixing with 24 years of grief and guilt. Enough! Elena's voice cut through their struggle like a surgeon's blade. She stood over them both, a sedative syringe in her hand, her grandfather's blood on her knuckles from where she'd pulled him back. It's over, Vincent. The police are here. The clinic's front door burst open, flooding the examination room with harsh white light and the controlled chaos of law enforcement. FBI agents in tactical gear swept through the space, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands that seemed to come from another world. But Sly's attention remained fixed on Torino, who lay gasping on the floor beside Bruno's examination table. The recording device had skittered away during their struggle, coming to rest near Elena's feet. She picked it up with steady hands, checking its display. Still recording, she announced to the lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Everything's on here. Agent Sarah Mitchell, because of course it was her. Sly realized with a mixture of heartbreak and pride, accepted the device with gloved hands. His daughter had aged well despite the years of deception, her face bearing the same determined expression that had driven her mother to seek the truth at any cost. Hello, Dad, she said, her voice carefully neutral. It's been a long time. The words hit harder than Torino's claws had. Sly struggled to his feet, Elena's supporting arm the only thing keeping him upright. Around them, federal agents were processing the scene with clinical efficiency. But all he could see was Maria's face, older, harder, but undeniably alive. I thought you were dead, he whispered. I know. That was the point. She nodded toward Torino, who was being helped into a sitting position by a paramedic. Blood trickled from his nose, staining his perfect white shirt. We needed him to believe his leverage over you was absolute, needed him to feel safe enough to make a mistake. Elena stepped forward, her own emotions warring across her face. You're my mother, the one I buried 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Maria's professional mask cracked for just an instant. The cancer, the funeral, it had to be real enough to fool him. I couldn't risk him discovering you were part of the operation. Operation? Sly felt the last pieces of his understanding shift into place. Elena's not just your daughter, she's federal. His granddaughter, agent, veterinarian, stranger, met his eyes with Jennifer's steady gaze. Pre-veterinary medicine at Temple University, then Quantico for specialized training in surveillance and undercover work. I've been waiting for this moment since I was 16 years old. The betrayal should have stung, but instead Sly felt something like admiration. 3 generations of women who had refused to let Vincent Torino's poison spread unchallenged. Jennifer with her investigation, Maria with her carefully orchestrated death and resurrection, Elena with her patient positioning in the one place Sly would inevitably bring Bruno when the time came. The microchip, he said. In Bruno. Real recordings, but not for Torino. Elena knelt beside the German shepherd's still form, her hand gentle on his fur. For us. Every confession you made to this loyal friend has been building our case against the man who killed your wife. Torino looked up from where the paramedic was treating his injuries, his voice a broken rasp. You have nothing. Hearsay and circumstantial evidence. My lawyers will— Your confession is on that recording, Maria interrupted. Everything you just admitted about Jennifer's murder, about the witness program, about 24 years of extortion. That's not hearsay, Vincent. That's a death sentence. The fight went out of him then, his shoulders sagging as the weight of his own words settled over him like a shroud. Vincent Torino, who had controlled Sly's life for nearly a quarter century, was finally and utterly defeated, not by violence or cunning, but by his own desperate need to be right. 6 months later, Sly knelt in the same Philadelphia cemetery where he'd once stood dry-eyed at Maria's fabricated funeral. This time the grief was real, the headstone honest Bruno, faithful friend and guardian. The German shepherd's grave sat beneath an ancient oak, its branches heavy with spring leaves that filtered the morning light into dancing patterns across the granite. Elena had chosen the spot, saying Bruno deserved to rest somewhere beautiful. She'd been right about that, just as she'd been right about so many things. I brought you something, Sly said softly, placing a small wooden box beside the headstone. Inside were Bruno's collar, his favorite tennis ball, and the Purple Heart Sly had earned in Vietnam, the one medal he'd never been able to display because it reminded him too much of the man he'd been before fear made him a coward. The cemetery was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft whisper of wind through the trees. In this place, surrounded by the honest dead, Sly could finally think clearly. The nightmares that had plagued him for 24 years were gone, replaced by something harder but cleaner, the simple ache of missing his dog. Footsteps approached on the gravel path. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Maria. He'd learned to recognize her walk during their awkward weekly meetings, the careful way she moved through the world after 3 years of being someone else. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling beside him on the grass. "Better." The word surprised him with its honesty. "Some days I still reach for my phone to call Torino's people, make the monthly payment. 24 years of habit." Maria nodded. They'd talked about this before, how trauma carved channels in the mind that took time to heal. "Dr. Brennan says that's normal. The therapy's helping?" "More than I expected." Sly traced Bruno's name with his finger, the granite cool and solid beneath his touch. "I told her about the warehouse yesterday. All of it. First time I've said those words out loud since 1997. That must have been difficult. Easier than I thought it would be." He glanced at his daughter, still strange to think of her as alive, as real. Turns out the truth weighs less than the lie, even when it's uglier. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people learning to be father and daughter again after decades of grief and deception. The process was slow, painful, marked by missed calls and awkward conversations over coffee. But it was real in a way their relationship had never been before Jennifer's death. "Elena graduates from the academy next week," Maria said eventually. Sly smiled. "I know. She invited me to the ceremony. Will you go?" "Already bought a suit." The smile widened. "First new one in 10 years. Figure my granddaughter deserves better than my old funeral clothes." Maria laughed, a sound he hadn't heard in 15 years. It transformed her face, erasing the federal agent's careful control and revealing the girl who used to sneak into his study to watch him practice lines. She's good at what she does, Maria said. The undercover work came naturally to her. Sometimes I think she inherited more from you than just the acting. She got the important things from Jennifer, the conscience, the courage. Sly pushed himself to his feet, his joints protesting the movement. 77 years old and feeling every day of it, but somehow lighter than he'd been at 50. What about you? Planning to stay Sarah Mitchell forever? I don't know yet. The Bureau says I can reclaim my identity officially, but she shrugged. Maria Stallone was damaged goods. Maybe Sarah's had a better life. Sly understood. He'd been thinking about names himself lately, about the difference between Sylvester Stallone the actor and Sly Stallone the man. The actor had built a career on playing heroes while the man had run from heroism when it mattered most. Maybe it was time to figure out who he wanted to be with whatever years remained. Torino's sentencing hearing is next month, Maria said as they walked toward the cemetery gates. I know. I'm testifying. You don't have to. We have enough evidence without... I want to. The words came out stronger than he'd intended. 24 years I let him control my life through fear. Time I returned the favor. They reached Maria's car, a sensible sedan that looked nothing like the flashy sports cars she'd driven as a young woman. Another life, another person. But when she hugged him goodbye, her arms felt the same as they had when she was 8 years old and believed her father was invincible. I love you, Dad, she whispered against his shoulder. I never stopped, not even when I hated you. I love you too. The words came easier now, worn smooth by practice. See you Sunday for dinner? Elena's cooking. Fair warning. Sly laughed, the sound carrying across the cemetery like a prayer. As he watched Maria drive away, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the simple, terrifying, wonderful possibility of tomorrow. Bruno would have liked that.